Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. The High Court has dismissed a challenge by 10 families of disabled people who claim that cuts in housing benefit for people with spare bedrooms discriminate against them. Their lawyers had argued that what critics call the bedroom tax would deny them the extra space necessary to cope with their health needs. The government said it had already provided £150 million to councils to make discretionary payments to those affected by its changes to welfare payments, and announced that it would bolster that fund with an extra £35 million. Mike Sargent reports.
Richard Rourke is a disabled council tenant who lives in a 3-bedroom bungalow. His stepdaughter, who's also disabled, stays there when not at university. The 3rd bedroom is used to store equipment, including a hoist and an electric wheelchair. But his housing benefit has been cut, and this morning he watched as a judge dismissed his and 9 other cases.
My local council have already started possession proceedings against me because I can't afford to pay the shortfall. And by the same token, they've got nowhere for me to go either, even if I wanted to move, which I don't, but they've got nowhere for me to go. So it's not a case of I choose not to. I've got no choice. They're giving me no choice.
In April, the government introduced the housing benefit cut, which opponents dubbed a bedroom tax. Social tenants with 1 spare room had a 14% reduction. For those with 2 extra bedrooms, it was a 25% cut. Disability campaigners have led the opposition to the policy, saying it discriminates against those who need the extra space or who can't move because of their disability. But today the High Court rejected their claim that the government had acted illegally. This was perhaps the most significant legal challenge so far to the government's welfare changes. And for the campaigners who've opposed them, it's a significant setback. But ministers welcome today's ruling and say additional money will now be made available for councils to help those who really need it.
We've trebled the discretionary housing payments, and can I also say that there are 2 million people nearly on a housing waiting list. They too will have disabled people who will be waiting. There are 250,000 people in overcrowded homes. Those too will have disabled people there and their children. So we have to look at it in the round.
And despite the bitter disappointment of those hoping to overturn the policy, the government says its reform is needed to save the taxpayer money and make the system fairer. Mike Sargent, BBC News, at the High Court.
Well, our political correspondent Norman Smith is in Westminster for us, and with this High Court decision, a sigh of relief in government.
Absolutely, Simon, and although government is saying there's no triumphalism, no gloating, I'm absolutely sure if you were standing outside Mr. Duncan Smith's office this morning, you would hear a long whistling sigh of relief, because this was a benchmark benefit change which the government had invested a huge amount of political capital and credibility into pushing through. It has been one of the most politically charged of benefit changes, even down to the language around it, with Labour insisting it's a bedroom tax and the government insisting it's simply removing a, quote, spare room subsidy. So defeat would have been a significant setback. It would also have unpicked the government's efforts to rein in the housing benefit budget. It would have made it harder to shake up the housing waiting list, the government arguing that this will make it easier for families in overcrowded accommodation to get larger homes. But above all, it seems to me, defeat would have sent a legal shudder through Mr. Duncan Smith's benefit reform agenda, because we know there are other court cases pending. And I suspect he will draw huge comfort today that it appears the courts are not going to listen too sympathetically to those citing human rights legislation to try and unpick benefit changes.
Norman Smith, thank you very much. There's more information on the changes to housing benefits and background to today's case in the High Court on our website. The address for that, bbc.co.uk/news. Shares in Barclays are falling this lunchtime after